I feel this little story touches on something at the heart of today's gospel reading. A doctor was enjoying himself at a cocktail party until a young woman approached him looking for some free medical advice. He spent at least an hour listening to her complaints. Then he advised her on what to do. And by the time the conversation was finished, his mood was ruined. So he saw a lawyer friend of his at the cocktail party and asked him if he thought it would be unethical to send the woman a bill for the advice. The lawyer answered, "Not at all. You gave her the same medical advice here at this party as you would have if she came to your office. She would have to pay for it." The doctor thanked him and left. The next day, the doctor received a bill for legal advice from the lawyer. It's all really about attitude. Today we have a teaching from Jesus on the kind of attitude we need as his followers. He used a very simple story about the man coming into his house after a hard day's work. Jesus offered the humorous suggestion, asking if we, as masters of the house, would have our slaves sit down while we fed them. The crowd listening to Jesus would have understood right away what the right answer was. Not because they owned slaves themselves, but because they were poor people and were most likely to be enslaved themselves. No master is going to serve the slaves. He's going to expect that they take care of him, and he's not going to gush over them or offer a big clap on the back. They can expect nothing, not even thank you. Jesus says that this is the way we should look on our service, the service that we offer to God. We should consider ourselves to be no more than servants, called to be obedient. When you do what you're supposed to do, we should not pat ourselves on the back and expect God to reward us. We should instead respond, "We are worthless servants. We have done what we should have done." This attitude seems rude, and it's not what we would expect. There's no mention of a place in heaven or a big financial reward. We have done what we were expected to do. In the early 1900s, the car maker Henry Ford asked a genius electrician called Charlie Steinmetz to build generators for his factory. One day, the generators ground to a halt, and his local mechanics could not get the generators to go again. So Ford called back Steinmetz, who tinkered with the machine for a couple of minutes and then threw the switch, and straight away the generators started working. A few days later that week, Ford received a bill for $10,000. Flabbergasted, the tight-fisted car maker asked why the bill was so high. Steinmetz replied, "For tinkering with the generators, the bill is $10. For knowing how to tinker with the machine cost $990. We're told that Ford actually paid the bill. Sadly, part of the human condition that affects so many aspects of our lives can be that sense of entitlement. We have reached our own self-image goals, and how now we're going to take advantage of it. Nobody is going to tell me what to do. I have come here every week for so many years, and yes, of course, this is my parking place. I've worked in this office for 20 years. Of course, I'm going to bring home the printer at the weekend and do a little project for myself. Isn't there a great desire to be promoted, to be judged special, so we can expect to receive a little bit more than everyone else? Today's gospel makes for difficult listening. We are merely servants. We have done no more than our duty. Yesterday, Father Dennis and I were blessing animals in the gathering area. It was a day after the feast of St. Francis of Assisi on Friday. St. Francis had a great desire to reform the church, to care for the poor and for the natural world around him. When Archbishop George Bergoglio left Buenos Aires in 2013 for the new conclave, he had a return plane ticket in his hand. He never thought at his age that he would become pontiff or would need to have a one-way ticket. But when he was elected, he was sure of the name that he wanted. Inspired by his care for the poor in Buenos Aires, his fears for the future of the church, and his desire for our future of the earth, and also his desire to move the church closer to its Christian values and roots, he proudly declared the name he chose, Francis. Not everyone sees themselves as merely servants. Even today in Rome, many have trouble with the behavior of Pope Francis. He is the only pope to have named himself after St. Francis of Assisi. He doesn't live in the fanciest part of the Vatican City. He eats with other people and eats the same food that they do. He seems to take seriously his title, Chief Servant of the people of God. We are called to that same service in life, asked to love others and to love ourselves. Today's gospel isn't telling us about the nature of God, but calls us to reflect on our attitude towards service. All we have to do is look towards Jesus, about the greatness of his service in that New Testament. Jesus was the one to wash the disciples' feet. There was a quiet humility in Jesus and in his teachings that was quite powerful. We are not asked to humiliate ourselves, but to try where we can to lift the other person up. In his time, the scribes and Pharisees often mixed up the difference between faith and service. Maybe the disciples did too. And so the parable of the servant, having come in from ploughing and tending sheep, expected to serve the master his meal. Just a question then. Why do you do good, and what motivates you? Do you do good because other people will reward you and think better of you? Do you do the right thing in work or in school because it will result in promotion? Somewhere in the thought process of choosing to do the right thing, is there a sense that I might gain from this? The workmen in today's gospel would have benefited materially from their work in the field. So he's told that he's already got his reward. But where is he spiritually? Is he prepared to serve? The Christian understanding of service is in conflict with the logic of commerce and self-interest, which moves much of our culture. That is why when the disciples started asking the Lord to increase their faith, his starting point was telling them about service. It is in faith that we truly understand that work of service. Jesus declared he came to serve, not to be served. And he set before us a model we are called to follow. So today's gospel doesn't rubbish all the wonderful things we do for other people, but it does challenge us to ask why. If it is motivated by faith, well, that is wonderful. If it is really motivated by our own self-interest, then maybe we have had our reward. Lord, help us to serve you in the people we meet over the days and week ahead.